Hello, this is Shelby Law with the Great Basin Weekly Fuels Briefing for Thursday, June 4th, 2026. We'll start by taking a look at our observed precipitation for the past 7 days. Here on the left, we have the inches, and on the right, the percent of normal. We can see that we have received some precipitation recently. This has been like last weekend across western Nevada, up into eastern Idaho and western Wyoming, and even northern Utah. But we've got some very dry spots out there as well, particularly eastern Nevada into western Utah and the southern Snake River Plain, southwest Idaho, and even down into southeast Utah. So some winners and losers out there in terms of long-term dryness. If we look at the drought indicators here as well, the eddy is a short-term drought looking at the past 2 months, showing again those areas in the central part of the Great Basin really seeing the most severe drought conditions there. If we look at the longer-term drought from the Drought Monitor, from the Climate Prediction Center, we've got a lot of drought out there as well that developed over the winter, especially over southern Nevada or southern Idaho here and across much of Utah. Our current ERC values are shown on this image. Many of our areas are still kind of on the lower end in that 60th to 80th percentile in the lighter green here, but all on the upward trend with the dry air mass that we've had in place. Again, this across the central parts of the Great Basin in southwest Idaho and southern Utah is where we're seeing the higher values, and we're starting to see some of those raw stations popping up above the 90th percentile. Let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into some local geographic areas. So starting with Idaho and Wyoming, here are a couple of ERC charts for these areas. The Payette is showing values just above normal for the time of year. They had a big drop last weekend with the precipitation and on a pretty steep upwards swing. Same story for western Wyoming. The values were definitely near records before the precipitation they had last weekend, and those values are increasing once again. In fact, the forecast is for those values to be back up near the record highs as we head into the first part of next week. And then across southern Idaho, same story. Those values have been above historical records for the past few weeks. They didn't receive a lot of precipitation down in south central Idaho last weekend, so those values are still sitting right around the historical maximums for the time of year, and they'll be there into the first part of next week. Looking at some of the reports from our local fuel specialists, starting with southwest Idaho, here we have the recent sagebrush fuel moisture values that are sampled there. We can see a lot of these values are much lower than they would normally be for the time of year. So for example, the Kuna site is normally at 150 and it's at 90%. Same for the Blackstone raw or sample site, normally at 166 this time of year, and it's all the way down into the mid 90s. So definitely low live fuel moistures in the sagebrush in southwest Idaho due to the ongoing dry conditions there. The southern sawtooth is also seeing very low subalpine fir and lodgepole pine and subalpine fir fuel moistures dropped into the high 80s, which is very low for this time of year. Across eastern Idaho and western Wyoming, these areas did receive the most precipitation last week, maybe over an inch on the northern portions of these areas, so definitely allowing green up to continue there. A note on the fuel loading, especially across southwest Idaho, where there was a very wet period in April, does appear to be producing a pretty decent grass crop in that area right now that's still got some green in it. All right, switching down to Nevada. Here again, a couple of ERC charts for some various spots. Western Nevada did see some precipitation last weekend, so that's why those values have dropped down to near normal for the time of year, but increasing with the dry weather that we have. Further east over northeast Nevada, those areas didn't see as much precipitation, so still sitting near the record highs for the time of year, and in fact setting new records in the forecast with the continued dry conditions expected. Some reports from our local fuel specialist are showing, here we're looking at a sample site, Mill Creek Sagebrush site, where those values are right at the historical minimums. So definitely very low sagebrush live fuel moistures for the time of year. And those values are all dropping and below normal. As far as fuel loading, this image comes from the Sierra Front in northern and western Nevada. This year's grass crop is fairly short and cured at low elevations, but the carryover fuels from last year are still quite significant, especially across northern Nevada, where we already have seen some larger grass fires. Switching down to Utah, we've got a couple of ERC charts here looking at southwest Utah first. Those values are above average for the time of year, but not quite setting records, still, with the ERCs continuing to increase with the very dry conditions we're expecting through the first part of next week. A little bit further north in the Uinta Basin, those values are kind of starting out below average this week. with the recent precipitation they had up there last weekend. But you can see a very dramatic and rapid increase in ERCs to popping up above average into the first part of next week. And then Southeast Utah, same kind of story, right at average right now, but expected to be up above the 90th percentile in the next few days by this weekend. Some local fuels information from our fuel specialists in Utah. Here we're focusing mainly across the southern half of the state where conditions are a little bit more critical. Starting with Canyon Country, the Ponderosa pine is at record low for the time of year, but there's not a huge grass crop this year. In fact, the Ponderosa pine again is setting new records there, so it's definitely of concern. The Dixie National Forest also expressed concern about the Ponderosa showing up at record lows as well, and as well as seeing some die-off in the Manzanita, and those sampled live and dead fuels are all below normal for the time of year. Then we do have one note on the fuel loading in southern Utah. In fact, there's a little bit more cheatgrass than last year in that 14 to 20 inches from Kanab to Panguitch. Summing this all up gives us our updates for the critical fuel status for the week. This map shows zones that are open or available for red flag warnings from the Weather Service. Red and yellow would indicate areas that are sort of where the fuels are ready to or available to carry fire in the event of a red flag warning event. And then just one note on some new products that we have available on our website. We have both a fire danger dashboard and a fuel moisture dashboard that were produced by Matt Panunto and Johnny Jew from Utah. So please take a look at those. There's a lot of great information available in those dashboards available from the GAC website. And that's it for today. Check back next Wednesday or Thursday for another weekly fuels webcast.